Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks so much for your word. Thanks for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, now I know people are going to, I'm kind of on this canary theme. You know, I'm exploiting that canary. And so now that, it's interesting because a number of years ago, I think I was listening to Caroline Glick, and she said, well, the Jews are the canary in the coal mine. And I thought, oh, well, that's opens an avenue for, title slides and that type of thing. So now I'm sort of in my canary mode. And if you don't like that one, then here's my canary in the hazmat suit and the canary resuscitator. It's a crazy world. I'm going to try to, Pam and I are leaving today, pray for our safety. We're traveling. We'll be in California. I'll be speaking at Calvary Chapel, the Harbor on the 29th of April. And in Bakersfield at Rock Harbor Church on the 30th of April, and then I'll be up in Central Washington at First Baptist of Okanagan in Central Washington on Sunday, May 4th. So we're covering a lot of territory. And somebody says, well, where's Okanagan? I said, well, it's right next to OMAC. So, right? Like you all know where those are. So it's crazy. I used to put a disclaimer on these things. So, by the way, just as sort of a disclaimer, I'm really going to try to keep this short because we want to get on the road today. And my wife is home feverishly packing and making sure we're not forgetting anything that we need to take with us. Because once we get out there, there's just no options. So I used to put a disclaimer on my prophecy updates that generative AI was not used in the preparation of this prophecy update. And that's getting increasingly difficult to do. But then a friend of mine who's a pretty smart Bible prophecy guy, he said, eventually we're all going to be using AI to do these prophecy updates because so much is happening. And there's a lot that happened this week. So I'm probably going to skip over a lot of what I've done because I'm going to really try to be out of here in about 40 minutes. So now don't hold me to that. And don't have a heart attack, though, if I actually keep to it. But it's crazy. I mean, there's so many things going on. And I thought this current cover of The Economist magazine was kind of interesting. Now, the age of chaos, and of course, the pictures there are all different versions of Donald Trump. And so this is the age in which we live. So some people think Trump is the Antichrist. Others thinks he's the greatest thing ever. I'm transactional with Trump, but if you post anything with Trump on Facebook, all of a sudden, I told you he was the Antichrist and all this other, and so eventually I have to take the post down. So I don't care if you think that, okay? But you got to make the case, and I don't think you're making the case. And maybe it'll change, okay? But this is crazy. My wheel of prophecy. And then I also have this chart about how I think the seals unfold, that they will increase in intensity over time. They don't open and then boom, there's this big intensity, okay? It increases over time, and they sort of track each other, and there's sort of like this peak, and I think the peak of their impact is around the time of the second coming of Christ. So, and we talk, I talk about acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding, and that as we get closer to the end, we're going to have a better understanding. So I think that as I mentioned in first hour, by the way, I did sermon first hour on Palm Sunday. The Shekinah Returns, I called it. So you can get that on our YouTube channel. But I did mention, there's, these fights on Facebook, and it's pretty clear nobody ever wins one. And everybody just gets mad at everybody else. So I think we're at that time, and I'm reluctant to take too dogmatic of a position on certain aspects of Bible prophecy. Israel's kind of easy, should be easy, but people spiritualize that and try to explain it away. And so I think we're just at this time where there's going to be an acceleration of a lot of things. And it's going to be a strange time. So here's just a few things. So I'm going to talk about some cultural things, scientific things, a little AI. Then we're going to get into the Middle East, some of the meetings that took place this week. And here's just my request. Y'all world leaders, take the week off, okay? Give us some breathing space. Everybody's got a conference, and there's important ones this week, and Trump's having people come, and tariffs and this, and it's just chaotic. But this is kind of an interesting cover from Newsweek magazine for this week's issue, Singles Pandemic. And I've talked about this a lot, probably more than other people, about demographics. And I'm not sure how the decline in demographics in these people who we think may or may not be end times players, when do we drop them out as not having enough people to do what's said? And so this is talking about a singles pandemic, that nobody wants to get married. This is true across the West, in the United States, in Europe, and other countries, and then nobody's having children. And then this morning I read the New York Times just because I follow the advice of somebody else. I always want to know what the devil's doing. So, but actually sometimes they actually have some good journalistic pieces on that. I know it drives people crazy when I say that, but they had a couple this week. But one of the ones this morning on their opinion page. So this is the opinion page of the New York Times. It's like 8 pages. It's talking about embryos, the death of embryos because of in vitro fertilization, and then sex selection that's taking place, and then what do we do with the leftover embryos? And this is an ethical issue, I think, for Christians to talk about. What do you do about in vitro fertilization? Because I know couples that do that. Look, Pam and I were a childless couple, and we, of course, we decided we were never going to do that, but I know people that have, but then you have these leftover embryos that are fertilized, and what do you do with them? But now what they're doing with it, they're saying well, I want a healthy kid, I want the genetic code to be right, and they analyze the embryos so they don't have a disease. They'll analyze them for intelligence, and then what do you do with the ones? You just discard them. But this has created a huge problem. So in India and China, they've done, mostly those cultures favor males, and with sex selection in pregnancy, they can determine whether the person is pregnant with a male or female. They want a male. And so now you're approaching a time where between China and India combined, those two countries will have 200 million males of marriageable age that do not have the prospect of a wife. And the world has never seen anything like this. I don't think we understand and so I think this plays into end times Bible prophecy and sort of the age of chaos that we're entering. And then you add this. This is from the Times of London. We heard this thing about the dire wolves that have been recreated through editing DNA. And these wolves have been gone for, 13,000 years? So they've named the two wolves Romulus and Remus. And if you, like me, you wasted a couple of years of your life taking Latin in high school, you learned a lot about Roman culture. I thought it was great. It prepared me for biblical Greek tremendously. But Romulus and Remus founded Rome. They were raised by wolves. So they call these wolves Romulus and Remus. That's why they named them that. But then they're talking about this. This is from the Times yesterday. Will bringing back species lead to dire consequences? Now, I would say that that's probably a rhetorical question. Rhetorical question being one that the answer to it is obvious. And the answer is yes, it will lead to dire consequences. And this leads to DNA, altering human DNA and all these things, and how much do you alter before the person is no longer human? And then this raises all kinds of theological questions that I can't answer here, but this is happening. They're editing, and so this is a picture of a woolly mammoth, and they're saying, we got the wolves, woolly mammoths are going to come back. So because they're going to edit DNA, and they're going to bring them back. And there's one of the most famous was a mastodon. They called mastodon out here by Newark, was found there. It was a Burning Tree golf course or something. They were digging it up and they dug up this massive mastodon, very famous. But this is, so here's another one. This is from, I don't know if it's from Wired magazine. Oh, this is from Nature. With mouse's help, a map shields light on the human brain. So what they did was they took a tiny portion of a mouse's brain, fed signals and that type of thing and information through it, and then mapped it out. Now, listen, when I see something like that, I see something that is so incredibly complex that it completely undermines random mutations that scientists believe that led to evolution. I would think that you cannot believe in evolution and see this. There's another one, another article. This was a fruit fly's brain that they analyzed. Now, listen, and by the way, I'm sure that one thing, they've not analyzed brains of people in Congress because that might be all black, you know. So they have to be careful who they analyze. So they're being very selective in who they do this. It says scientists have created the largest functional map of a brain to date, a diagram of the wiring connecting 84,000 neurons as they fire off. Using a piece of a mouse's brain about the size of a poppy seed, the researchers identified those neurons and traced how they communicated via branch-like fibers through a surprising 500 million junctions called synapses. In a poppy seed. And it all happened by chance. This is, I mean, I don't have enough faith to believe that, I will be honest with you. The massive data set published in Wednesday by the journal Nature marks a step towards unraveling the mystery of how human brains work. Well, I can save them some research time. They don't work a lot of the time. That's the problem. So thank you. Of course, you never get published for saying, you know, that's not... So I'm sure Doge will dig this out. And then here, this is another article I found in Nature magazine. Mind-blowing quantum computer untangles the mathematics of knots. You ever notice you take like a pair of headphones, unwind them, put them in your pocket, and you pull them out, and there's like 20 knots. What are the physics of that happening? I mean, that's, my brain cannot consider, you know, and I know it happens. And people, but I don't understand. You put them in your pocket and it's like magic. You pull it out and it's a bunch of knots. By the way, you put it back in and it's more knots. It never comes untangled. That's the thing. And so this is another article. This is from Wired magazine. This is your brain on computers. And one of the things they have in there is an article called Happy Q Day, Happy Quantum Day. And they talk about the fact that the quantum apocalypse is coming. Be very afraid. So it's interesting. You know, people look at what we talk about here at Fellowship Bible Chapel and other friends who do these prophecy updates. Oh, you're just a bunch of fearmongers. These are secular scientists talking about the coming apocalypse. So listen, when secular scientists and politicians and everything are talking and using apocalyptic language, maybe it's time for people in the church to pay attention that maybe it is apocalyptic times that we live in. How about that? Okay, instead of ignoring it. One day soon at a research lab near Santa Barbara or Seattle or a secret facility in the Chinese mountains, it will begin the sudden unlocking of the world's secrets, your secrets. Cybersecurity analysts call it the Q Day, the day someone builds a quantum computer that can crack the most widely used forms of encryption. These math problems have kept humanity's intimate data safe for decades. But on Q Day, everything could become vulnerable. For everyone's emails, emails, text messages, anonymous posts, location history. There's no anonymous posts, by the way. I mean, I did a lot of work in cybersecurity and computer type document production, and believe me, so when a certain presidential candidate said, well, I used bleach, or whatever, bleach bit or something to get rid of me, they didn't get rid of those emails. They're there, they can be recovered if somebody wants to recover them. That's just complete. Hospital records, power stations, the entire global financial system. And you think I'm extreme and fear-mongering? We're kind of playing Russian roulette, says Michelle Mosca, who co-authored the most recent quantum threat timeline report from the Global Risk Institute, which estimates how long we have left. You'll probably win if you only play once, but it's not a good game to play. When Mosca and his colleagues surveyed cybersecurity experts last year, the forecast was sobering. A 1 in 3 chance that Q-Day happens before 2035. And the chance that it has already happened in secret, some people I spoke to estimated 15%, about the same as you'd get from one spin of the revolver cylinder in Russian roulette, assuming you're playing with 6 bullets. So here's this article from Quantum Threat Timeline, and this one figure that's there, it says this: a malicious adversary may already now intercept, access, copy, and store encrypted data, deferring decryption to when a cryptographically relevant quantum computer will become available. In other words, what are they doing? They're hoovering up, that's a Ohio term for vacuuming up, all of your data, because Hoover was in North Canton, Ohio, near where I grew up for a lot of years, and they're hoovering up your data, they're analyzing, but they're storing it. They may not be able to unencrypt it, but they're waiting for the day when they can. And when that happens, we think things have changed. We have no idea what that's going to mean. Also, and this is kind of an interesting article in in Wired, the weight of the internet. They're calculating how much the internet weighs. And some think it weighs about as much as a potato. So, or a mouse brain, I guess. Maybe that's so computing at the end of the world. That's another article in there, and they talk about the worm that no scientists can clock. And they're like, we can't figure out, there's this worm, and we're trying to analyze it on a worm, and they can't figure out how it works. And they're telling us that all this stuff happened by random chance. It's complete nonsense, but they're in charge and they believe it. Now, I'm going to go through the rest of this stuff, and I will admit, I preached first hour. I had a lot of things going on this week. I'm just trying to keep up. And so this is going to be, so I could have called this, okay, you could put my picture in there, the Age of Chaos prophecy update. So in tribute to the Age of Chaos, I would say, let's have a chaotic prophecy update. Let's just kind of jump around from subject to subject. So you can, maybe somebody can unpack this and make shorts out of it, so that shorts, meaning a video, not shorts that you wear, but shorts, that somebody can unpack and try to piece together. So this thing with lawfare and that type of thing that's going on in our courts is just crazy. And by the way, the Supreme Court needs to do their job. They're not doing their job. By the way, in Congress, conservatives in Congress can limit jurisdiction of courts. The Chief Justice could do it. The Supreme Court could do it. The courts could do it. The Congress could do it. And somebody needs to do something, because these judges are out of control. And the problem, I was thinking about the progression of the election of judges in the United States. Now, in many states, you're essentially appointed to the position. I remember when people used to run in partisan elections for judges. And then, for example, in Franklin County, where I practiced law for a lot of years, they changed it, and it sort of became a joint committee of Republicans and Democrats. And they had, Bill, would they have 15 judges or so in Franklin County? And they always worked it out so that, 8 were from one party and 7 from the other. Sometimes, somebody would win and it might be 9-6, but they sort of got it evenly divided because, of course, evenly divided, ideological divided things work much, much better than ideologically united things. Well, now in a lot of states, they're going away from any kind of election. You get appointed, and then you'll stand for a thumbs up or thumbs down election, stay or go. And so what happens is you get these people that are in these judgeships forever, and I don't think that was ever the intention. And it's really bad in Israel. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this. I mean, the judges there have kind of organized it so that only judges that think like them get appointed. And then they don't have a constitution, so they say, well, we don't need to do this. So, for example, the head of the Shin Bet, Netanyahu, fired. Then the Supreme Court says, you can't fire him, you have to hire him back. And my solution was, okay, hire him back, put him in like what a Faraday cage is? A Faraday cage is like nothing in or out. Take away his cell phone, let him sit there all day. Here's your check, we'll give you a check at the end of the week, and you just sit there and do nothing. Now the court says, no, you can't do that. But the administrative arm of the government can't fire the people in the administrative branch of the government. It's absolutely insane. So we have this problem with deportations. Some are being deported, some are not, and the judges are all over the place on it. And I think it's a legal crisis that we're having. Okay, so let's talk about the Middle East in the short time we have remaining. So there's meetings going on everywhere. So the big meetings right now are conflicts between Israel and Syria, Israel and Turkey and Syria, the United States and Iran, Israel and Iran. And there's meetings. So the U.S. sent their envoys over to Oman to have a meeting with the Iranians. They had a 2-hour meeting yesterday. And I will be honest with you. I would tell Steve Witkoff, thanks, go play golf, okay? Don't go to the golf, go play golf. Maybe he got the memo. It said go play golf, and he thought, I'm supposed to go to the golf and try to make all these peace deals. He doesn't know what he's doing. I'm sorry. He thinks the Iranians are just another person you can negotiate with. And like Hamas, well, they may be not so bad if they're not militarized. And this is happening in the UK and all these things. I have there's a big question about free speech. And I think I have something in here. So here's something, this is how to tell somebody you're against free speech without saying you're against free speech. So I think this happened in Germany. So this last year, somebody took this politician holding a sign and they photoshopped it. And they put in there the sign, they changed it to this, and it says, I hate freedom of speech. Person was arrested, charged, sentenced to 7 months in prison and a fine of half of the person's annual salary for putting that up. And so it's kind of interesting that the person that they accused, they sort of Photoshop saying, I hate freedom of speech, proved that she hates freedom of speech. And the whole apparatus. So that's kind of, and this is where we are a lot of places. So there were a lot of meetings this week. Prime Minister Netanyahu was at the White House. He met with President Trump. And so I'm going to play a little bit of the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu. So first, I'm going to jump in about a minute in after Trump. I'm kind of getting the impression on Trump that he kind of liked being on TV. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he dominates the news cycle. So anyway, so here's the meeting. And by the way, Bibi was in Hungary, and he got a message, you need to come to Washington. Now, there's some dispute on tariffs and that type of thing, but there's a big thing with Iran. So the first part of the meeting, they're going to talk a little bit about Iran.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to have a very, very special person. I've dealt with him for a long time, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel. And we had lunch together. We had meetings together, along with his very capable staff. And I think we've come up to some pretty good solutions and conclusions. And we'll be working a little bit after this. And then I assume you're going back home.
Yes, sir.
This is a quick stop, in and out. But we appreciate you being here. And we are a friend of Israel, as you know. I would say that I'm by far the best president that Israel has ever even thought of seeing. And it's an honor to be so, and to be so thought of. And many friends in Israel, they are not in an easy area. It doesn't go easy, but we are helping them. And likewise, they've been helping us very much. And so we'll see how it all works out. But we had great discussions today, I think, on the obvious subject of Iran, and also the less obvious subject with respect to Israel, and that's trade. And I think the Prime Minister is going to tell you a little bit about trade and what they're doing for the United States. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Benjamin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Mr. President, I want to first thank you for inviting me again to the White House. You've been a remarkable friend of the State of Israel. You stand by us. You're standing with us. You are a great, great champion of our alliance. And you actually do the things that you say you do. And I think that people respect that enormously. I certainly do, and the people of Israel do, and I think the Jewish people do as well. We just saw your representative in the Department of Justice fighting anti-Semitism, standing up for Israel in international forums. I just want you to know from the heart, it's deeply, deeply appreciated. As you said, we had the opportunity to talk today about many subjects. First, if I can mention tariffs, it's a subject of some interest today. I can tell you that I said to the President a very simple thing. We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers, a variety of trade barriers that have been put up unnecessarily. And I think Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same. I recognize the position of the United States. It says, we're allowing other countries to put tariffs on us, but we don't put tariffs on them. And, I'm a free trade champion, and free trade has to be fair trade. And I think that's basically the position that you have put forward, Mr. President. We are going to eliminate the tariffs, and rapidly. I had the opportunity to speak to Secretary Lutnick yesterday. We talked about how we could effect this quickly, and I hope to bring a solution very quickly. We're not talking about intentions. We're not talking about just words. We're talking about results. And those results are going to come in. So that's the first.
Thank you very much. That's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, what about the hostages deal?
So during the meeting, and if you watch the whole thing, it's about 50 minutes. And, the report, you get the Prime Minister of Israel there and Trump, and they don't want to talk about Israel or anything like that. They always have their own agenda and questions. So Trump was also asked near the end. So there were, on the Iran issue, Bibi's body language seemed to be a little bit really like sitting on the edge of his seat type thing. Like, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? And because, at first it was, we're going to bomb Iran, we're going to take care of them, and now we're going to negotiate with them, maybe we'll get a deal. And so the big concern in Israel right now is, if they do a deal, is it going to be worse than the JCPOA that Obama put in? And I'm just telling you, if Steve Witkoff is running the show and nobody's riding herd on him, I'm concerned about that. And, the Houthis are bombing ships in the Red Sea. They've been shooting down some of our drones. And I think that what that demonstrates is that air campaigns have a sort of short shelf life. So remember, Trump sent a bunch of cruise missiles into Syria. They blew up some runways. And what happened? In a week, they were using the airport again. You really need to do a ground invasion to take care of it. Now, there are words that Houthis are the real government of Yemen, the officially recognized government of Yemen, not the Houthis, are going to launch an invasion against the Houthis in the Yemen capital of, I don't know how you say it, Sana'a. But I'm telling you what, that'll be brutal. I mean, I would guess 500,000 people are going to die if that happens. And by the way, you won't see any protests at Columbia or Harvard or in London or anything about what happens to the people on either side of that war in Yemen. And they've already had over 1 million people killed down there. They've had over 1 million killed in Syria. Nobody marches for them. So it's concerning. And the problem is Israel took out a bunch of air defense systems back in October. So now what are we? November, December, January, February, March, 5.5 months. After that happened, there's a shelf life to those attacks. And so right now we're not effectively shutting down the Houthis. We bomb them, we destroy infrastructure, we kill people, and they keep firing missiles. And so maybe the real government of Yemen is thinking, well, we'll do a ground invasion. That'll probably be the way to take care of them, annihilate them. And so I'm just saying it's a very difficult situation that Trump and Netanyahu find themselves in. And what do you do? And now when you add underground facilities that are hardened and hundreds of feet underground, how do you take that out? How do you do that? And I will say this. I've studied geopolitics for a long time. Nobody is going to invade Iran. Nobody's going to do it because it's essentially a mountain fortress. Tehran is surrounded by big mountains. It's impossible. I just think it's impossible for an army to go in there and do anything. And we ought to learn some lessons from Afghanistan, which is kind of rearing its head again. So later in the news conference or press conference, somebody asked Trump a question about Turkey, Erdogan in Turkey. And so this is what Trump had to say. Here we go. You'll hear the question first, but then Trump will speak and you'll be able to hear that.
Turkey to influence Syria. What do you think? Do you think Turkey's influence in Syria can actually make it a better, more peaceful country, or vice versa?
Well, I have great relations with a man named Erdogan. Have you heard of him? Yeah. And I happen to like him, and he likes me, and I know the press will get very angry. He likes Erdogan, but I do, and he likes me, and we've never had a problem, and we've gone through a lot, and we've never had a problem. We've always got, as you remember, we got our minister back from Turkey. You remember that? And this was a big deal at the time, and we got him back. And I told the prime minister, I said, just, Bibi, if you have a problem with Turkey, I really think I'm going to be able to work it out. You know, I have a very, very good relationship with Turkey and with their leader, and I think we'll be able to work it out. So I hope that's not going to be a problem. I don't think it will be a problem. Now, with that being said, I believe it was Turkey, and I said that to him. I said it. I said, congratulations. You've done what nobody's been able to do in 2,000 years. You've taken over Syria with different names, but same thing. I said, you've taken it over. He's taken it over through surrogates. He goes, no, it was not me. I said, it was you. But that's okay. You don't have to say, well, it sort of maybe was me. Okay. But what he did, he's a tough guy, and he's very smart. And he did something that nobody was able to do. You know, you got to hand it to him. Any problem that you have with Turkey, I think I can solve. I mean, as long as you're reasonable. You have to be reasonable. We have to be reasonable. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, I was really concerned about that part of the discussion because Erdogan is not a good guy. I don't care if he's your friend or not. I'm concerned the way that came across. I'm sorry. And like I said, I'm transactional with Trump. And this one, I'm not buying the deal. Okay? I'm not buying the deal on Erdogan. And so there's a couple articles. They're linked in the show notes. And I'm already bumping up. What happened? Did somebody move that clock? Ahead. The time, I use this hourglass, and it's like, man, the sand, it's like the hole's as big as the sand at the top. It's just like, boom. That's the way things are moving these days. So great articles in the Jerusalem Post this week. They're linked in the show notes. One is by Seth Fransman. And by the way, just look up J-Post, Seth Fransman, and read his recent articles. I know Seth. I've had dinner with him a couple times, and I'm just like, I don't know how he does it. He writes these incredibly factually dense analyses of things, and they make sense, but you got to really read them because it's not surface level stuff. And he puts out like 5 a week sometimes. It's like, go take a vacation, And so I would highly recommend this. Can Israel and Turkey reach agreement on Syria? So right now there are meetings taking place between Israel and Turkey about establishing some kind of deconfliction agreement in Syria, like Israel had with Russia for a lot of years. So they don't want to get into a war, or at least they want everybody to think they don't want to get into a war. So they're going to set some parameters. So they're actually having meetings right now in Azerbaijan. But when the Israeli delegation flew to Azerbaijan, so if you look at a map, you have Israel, Syria, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and then Iran's over here. So to get to Azerbaijan, it would seem like, well, you just fly over Syria and Turkey right to Azerbaijan. No, they had to fly all the way around Turkey over Greece and Armenia and everything to get to Azerbaijan. So that shows you that the fact that they had to do that kind of gives you an idea of where Erdogan is coming from. And then there's another article. Well, this is peace between Israel and Syria is possible. This is somebody who's very optimistic. And then Jonathan Spire, one of the best analysts on Middle East affairs, are Israel and Turkey headed for a confrontation? And essentially he says, it sure seems like this is going to happen at some point. Ongoing friction has resulted as Turkey employs its naval vessels to harass ships exploring for natural gas resources in Greek or Cypriot waters. It is set to announce a similar EEZ, that's exclusive economic zone. So what Turkey did years ago when Israel discovers gas in the Mediterranean off the coast, they're going to build a pipeline and it's going to go to Greece. Then it goes to Europe. Turkey didn't like that. So Turkey said, well, you can't cross our exclusive economic zone without our permission. Well, what kind of economic zone do you have? You only have the coastal waters, and you don't really have that much, Turkey. But Turkey has this blue water doctrine that governs its military. And so what they did was, we entered into an agreement with Libya to share their exclusive economic. So they took this slice, and it's like, look, our Libyan Turkish exclusive economic zone cuts off Israel. You have to get our permission to go across that with your pipeline. So now they're going to do one with Syria, and they've taken over half of the island of Cyprus, Turkey has. And so and I'm just telling you, Erdogan is negotiating, so Trump is like in your face. Erdogan's behind the scenes doing all this. And so there's going to be some kind of conflict, I think, between Turkey and Israel. And by the way, this does play in the Bible prophecy, does it not? There's no doubt Turkey's part of this Ezekiel 38:39 thing. And by the way, Ezekiel 38:39 may be all the way at the end, just before Jesus returns, but there may be sort of like what looks like Ezekiel 38:39 happened before that, sort of a pattern. So watch for that. In other words, it might be a partial or false fulfillment. Everybody says, oh, Ezekiel 38 and 39 has happened when the big one's coming further down the road. And where you put that battle in Ezekiel 38 and 39 on your timeline will determine a lot of other aspects of your eschatology. And it gets very, very complicated and people get very, very mad. So here's a Foundation for Defense of Democracies had a discussion about confliction between Turkey and Israel. And here they just had a policy conference the other day. Here's what they said.
I think that's the nail on the head. I mean, we talked about Turkey's aspirations for neo-Ottomanism or Erdogan's, and this is it, right? Yeah. He sensed sort of an opportunity, seeing after Hezbollah and Hamas's sort of destruction at the hand of Israel, a weakened Iran in the region, and its patronage of the
that was
Syrian
really
state.
key because Hezbollah was keeping Bashar al-Assad afloat to a great extent. And Iran was, because it was essentially a colony of Iran.
Right. Exactly. And the Russians also got far distracted with the war in Ukraine. So
because they had established and enlarged naval bases that gave them a warm water port, all of that.
Exactly.
Right.
And Erdogan has long, since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war, this is the first time he has so desired to topple the Assad regime and desirous of regime change in Damascus, because Erdogan has wanted a sort of region ruled by Sunni leaders, Arab leaders that are sort of close to his vision, his Muslim Brotherhood vision, expansionist vision of the region. And so as soon as he sensed the weakness, I think at the end of 2024, I think Erdogan greenlit, and they're very proud of kind of explicitly sort of admitting to this, saying, yep, we pushed the button for HTS, with Sharad saying, now's the time to take it.
Well, and I think he's a little bit incorrect in that what Erdogan was doing for years was building up these militias up around Idlib. Then when Iran was weakened, then he pushed the button. But it's all that stuff, it's sort of like I talk about, there's like a buildup. And then it seems like, oh, that just happened all of a sudden. Well, they were working on it for a very long time. And he takes a long view on that. So, and by the way, Iran's been weakened, but here's this thing like, here's Iran, this is from Alma Research, the new Iranian corridor to Hezbollah. So they're going around Yemen and through Sudan and Libya to get weapons. And then they're also going through Iraq and Turkey. And you'll see these stories that the militias, the Iranian militias in Iraq are backing off. That was the report. Then the next day, Ayatollah Khamenei is saying, hey, we're going to give them missiles. We're going to give them long-range missiles in Iraq. So you see how this is, I'll call it a negotiation. This is how the Iranians negotiate. You think you got them someplace, and then they do this, they give missiles to somebody else, and now you're back kind of to square one. You're always back on your heels with them. Trying to think if I should say that or not, because I had a friend who was. So this sounds racist, but it's not. It's reality. So I had an attorney. This guy was a monster in the courtroom. I mean, he was phenomenal. But he collected Persian rugs. And this is 25 years ago. We had this discussion. And I said, these are. He goes, listen, if you want to understand Iran, go down to the Persian rug store and negotiate buying a Persian rug. Because you're never going to get to a price, you can be walking out the door and it's going to change. And he said, that's how the Iranians negotiate geopolitical deals. The same way that the Persian rug guys down the street in your town negotiate. He goes, it's just a different way of how they do business, and it's hard for us. Like we don't go to Costco and negotiate a price, right? Okay, but it's different in Arab and Middle Eastern cultures. It's just different. I remember walking through the old city a number of years ago, and it was in the Arab quarter of Jerusalem, and they always tell you, don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. And I made eye contact with this guy. And he looks at me and he goes, hello there, big man. You must be very wealthy. Come, let me sell you many things. So I was, so I had to negotiate my way out of that little trap. But so there's first I'll do Turkey, and then we'll do So there's a big diplomatic conference this week in Turkey. This is, guess who shows up at this big Antalya Diplomacy Summit in Turkey? Here is Al-Shara. Comes with his wife. He's this big star walking through the crowd. Everybody wants to meet him. They're pressing the flesh. And I think Seth Fransman wrote in the Jerusalem Post just a short time ago, hey, everybody that met him there was pretty impressed with this guy. So he's got kind of a charisma. And so I'm kind of watching this guy because I'm just not sure how this is unfolding. This guy was Al-Qaeda. He was ISIS. And now he's got the suit, he's got his wife, she's dressed up in a nice light blue ensemble, with, and but look at how everybody was going after him at this conference. It's amazing. So you go to social media and Erdogan's digital media, and everybody's there. And so he's issuing all these statements. And so here's one of the statements that he was busy this week too. It's like, Erdogan, take the week off for crying out loud. Give us, he's very busy. Israel's attacks on Lebanon and Syria are undermining efforts to combat ISIS. He is trying to undermine the December 8th revolution in Syria by stirring up ethnic and religious affiliations. Turkey will not allow Syria to be dragged into a new vortex of instability. Well, we took care of that already. I would particularly like to express that we do not see the look at this statement, and this was in bold in his tweet. I would particularly like to express that we do not see the territorial integrity, stability, and security of our neighbor Syria, with whom we share a 911-kilometer-long border, as separate from ourselves. And so when Trump made that statement in the Oval Office on Monday with Netanyahu, everybody says, oh, you're making it up. And I'm like, read Erdogan's tweets and tell me that Trump was making it up. Erdogan is saying that Syria is very important to his neo-Ottoman Muslim Brotherhood expansionism. And he's been playing the game, he's been playing a long game, and now he's been able to put things together. Look, he also said this is on April 11th. No one should misunderstand or misinterpret our composure, our patience, and our attitudes towards resolving issues through dialogue, and our calmness should not lead anyone into very wrong desires. In other words, Israel, you need to back out of that area that you're trying to do deconfliction zones in Syria, and you shouldn't be bombing military installations and hardware and that type of thing, because you're getting into what Erdogan terms wrong desires, or fantasies, I think he called them. So that's, and then here's Erdogan, or Macron. He comes out, we need a two-state solution. In June, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. We'll see how that goes for him. I need to talk to Bill Koenig about what's going to happen to him. I mean, it's just like every newspaper I pick up, it's just like the headlines, just to talk about the headlines, are pretty important. And by the way, if you think that the Syrian military doesn't have designs on Jerusalem, this is a AI generated video of Turkish soldiers marching to the Dome of the Rock. Go back to that poster I posted, talked about ad nauseum. Yesterday, Hagia Sophia. Today, Damascus. Do you see how that's worked over the last 2 months? Tomorrow, Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. And by the way, I suppose it'd be kind of easy to shoot down their plane balloons, I would think. So there's a lot going on in Syria, a lot of areas. This is kind of a map. And so then there's another, I have like 80 slides left. I'm not going to do them. So this is a New York Times article. I put a link in the show notes. It should get you past the paywall. I think it's important to read it because it's a pretty good piece. So they talked to people in Iran, and they said, okay, why is Ayatollah Khamenei now willing to negotiate, at least appear to negotiate with Trump? And the word is, from this article, citing unnamed sources, but it seems pretty credible to me, that people within the Iranian regime, particularly on the president's side, so the Iranian regime is organized sort of like the Italian, the mob families in The Godfather. They give Brooklyn to this group. There might be oil and gas to the IRGC. It might be this in construction and that type of thing. These people get water and utilities, and everybody makes their money, and they contribute. They don't make huge personal fortunes, but they control like $100 billion fortune, like as much as the richest people on the planet, but they're all designed to further the Iranian cause and get their little piece in it. So what happened was these guys came to Khamenei and said, listen, you're not in a very strong position right now. You've lost Hezbollah. You've effectively lost Hamas. The Houthis are under attack. They're going to come after you. What you should do is at least give the appearance of trying to negotiate something right now. And so all of a sudden now here's Khamenei wanting to negotiate. Okay. How much is that rug in the window? And so they're talking about the fact it was a closely held urgent meeting. Iran was pondering a response to President Trump's letters seeking nuclear negotiations. So the country's president, as well as the heads of the judiciary and parliament, huddled with Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, last month, according to two senior Iranian officials familiar with the meeting. Khamenei had publicly and repeatedly banned engaging with Washington, calling it unwise and idiotic. The senior officials, in an unusual coordinated effort, urged him to change course, said two officials who were familiar with it. The message to Khamenei was blunt. Allow Tehran to negotiate with Washington, even directly if necessary, because otherwise the Islamic Republic's rule could be toppled. Their economy's in shatters. People are mad. A lot of people are upset. And so the regime is looking at the current situation as an existential threat to the future existence of Iran. Now, I'm reading through Daniel 7 and 8, and I'm thinking maybe something happens to Persia before all this starts to really unfold. That might happen. Here was Trump on Air Force One, was asked some questions about Iranian negotiations. This is on Air Force One. Here's what he had to say. Well, you'll catch the usual Trump phrase.
We know that your ultimate goal is to not allow them to have a nuclear weapon. What are your short-term goals for talks this weekend?
Only that. I want them not to have a nuclear weapon. I want Iran to be a wonderful, great, happy country. But they can't have a nuclear weapon. And we're negotiating with them on Saturday. We have a big meeting with them.
What do you hope to come?
And right now we have a meeting with President Putin as we speak. There's a meeting going on right now. But with Iran, I want them to flourish, but they can't have a nuclear weapon.
And here was Steve Witkoff. Before he went to Iran, he went to, I think, Moscow and met with Putin of Russia to talk about that. And they're talking about what are they going to do about this Ukrainian thing. That's also on the table right now. Here was General Kellogg said, just split it up. Make it like Berlin. Give Russia this part, Ukraine this part, and the allies like the Brits and the French will kind of come over here and help the Ukrainians in their part, and Russia can take care of the other part. I don't know. That's on the table too. But at the same time, all this is going on is Germany's in major problems. This is what the article says. More and more Germans are afraid outside. It's like, I forget what the number is, 38% fear becoming victim of a crime. They're not German gangs, friends. And they're concerned about it. And so now they think that the AfD could come in and take over. And so Europe's talking about we're gonna put together we're gonna put together a European army, and we're gonna take care of this. And it's just, where are they gonna get the money? And somebody said that, I think I heard somebody say this week, the other article was, I don't know where I have it, that the infrastructure in Germany is falling apart. Bridges are falling down because they haven't been spending the money on that. They've been spending it on a welfare state. And so now the joke is that if the German tank that's still operating, the tank, tries to cross a bridge, the bridge will fall down. And how scary is, the German army, which may have a dozen operating tanks. And they're trying to build it up, but it's going to cost money. They're talking trillions of dollars. Where are they going to get the money? Their economy is in very, very bad shape. And so there's a lot of rhetoric going around right now, and I don't know exactly how this is going to all play out. So Witkoff, then he went on to Oman, and he met, and they had a couple-hour meeting, and they're going to meet soon in a couple weeks. So I don't expect anything to happen soon. So a lot of things going on, a lot of turmoil in Israel. I'll try to do an update this week if I have time, where we're traveling. Maybe not. You'll hear from me again. I promise I'm not going to shut up. But the legal situation in Israel is very bad. The Shin Bet is operating against the Netanyahu government. If you want to hear a good podcast, I think it's 20 minutes long. I don't know, maybe it's 50 minutes long. Speed it up to 2 times. Danny Seaman, my friend, I've interviewed him many times. He's now got a regular podcast at JNS. Go to the JNS channel and see his podcast about the Shin Bet security service in Israel. It's pretty shocking, and it's very, very informative. And just go to JNS and look up, just click on videos and look for a recent video with Danny Seaman. And I can't remember who it was he interviewed. It's a lot of stuff going on. So I'll close with this. I use this first hour. So this is a group called Jewish Voices for Peace. These people collectively might have an operating brain cell between them. So they're having an anti-Zionist Passover Seder. And maybe the theme of this should be, hey, it wasn't really that bad in Egypt, was it? And as I said, the Exodus was to get Israel out of Egypt, but it lasted for 40 years because they had to get Egypt out of Israel. And so they're talking about this, and I don't know where this thing is taking place. I guess get your keffiyeh and your also says here, mask required. So I don't know if that means mask like we would think of them, or keffiyeh mask or something like that. It's a crazy world. There's a lot of things going on. So again, April 29th, I'll be at Calvary Chapel Harbor in Huntington Beach. April 30th at Rock Harbor Church in Bakersfield, California. Those are on evening. I think they start at 6:30 or 7. And look forward to seeing some of you if you can come. And we'll be traveling. We're driving, so just pray that we have safe travel on the roads. And for a change, no flat tires. But it's crazy. What was this? Oh yeah, Hamas it's like dropping people from the fatality list. It's like the women and children are disappearing, and it's men, which is what Israel's been saying all along. You can't trust the Hamas figures. They lie about everything. So, and you can follow that. Anyway, let's pray, and we'll take this up again sometime soon. Lord, thanks for this day. We pray that you'll watch over us. Pray you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. Pray you'll help us to be wise and discerning in these times as we watch things unfold around us. Pray you'll bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.